Hey VC, what's up? It's me, yours truly. I am back to post a quick video here. This is going to be a response to George, the Elvis vinyl guy. This is he's doing his 300 subscribers contest. He's had it up for a couple weeks now. I think his deadline is like right at the beginning of July, like July 1st, July 2nd, something like that. So if you haven't jumped on board yet, make sure you go check out his channel and yeah, and just kind of jump on board. It's a cool contest, some really good questions, and I'd actually been pulling out albums for the answers to this over the past week and a half. Been kind of just sitting on my table over here, and so I had a few minutes after work today and just wanted to jump on board and jump on board his contest. So let me just jump right into it because there's some good questions, and I want to make sure I don't take up too much time here. His first question was, show the record that means the most to you. And of course, I cheated a little bit on most of these questions. I mean, it doesn't give you any extra points, so, figure why not. Any chance to talk about music. And there was a lot of different ways he said you can take that, whether it's about, value or just a record that you just, love, blah, blah, blah. So there were three that I actually pulled out, and kind of for a couple different reasons. But number one, this is definitely one that kind of comes on my list, which is Sam Magwan and the African All-Stars. And the main reason why this is, one of the records that means the most to me is because this is number one I thought I would never find, and one it's just extremely hard to find, quite frankly. When I was a kid, my dad had these old 8-track tapes with a bunch of African music on it, and there were a number of tracks off of this album that were on there that a friend gave them to him a long time ago. I mean, I'm grade school here. And so we used to listen to it all the time, jam out to it, dance to it, loved it, but had no idea, of course, who it was. And I stumbled across that 8-track tape later on. My mom actually gave it to me as a birthday gift because she found it, many years later. And I had just been wanting it for so long and had no idea it had even been pressed on vinyl at any point. Because these old African albums on vinyl, you don't find those kind of still around, or more so really still in good condition at all. And so to discover this one, it was just like, oh my goodness, I just never in a million years even thought I would see it, much less have it. And I got it on eBay for like $15. I mean, it didn't cost me almost anything at all. But that's definitely one that I'm just so very happy to have in my collection. It means a lot to me. The other two would be number one, this one here, which is John Coltrane's Love Supreme. And the reason I say this one is because this is the album that introduced me to all things jazz, outside of, more Kenny G type of stuff. I didn't listen to any jazz whatsoever prior to walking in a store one day. The guy was playing this, and it just started moving me, and I was like, holy cow, I don't know anything about jazz. I have no idea what that is, but that crap's making me feel good. It's like, what the heck is it? And he introduced me to John Coltrane, and this was the copy he was playing. So I picked it up, and so this album sparked all things jazz for me. So this definitely means a lot. And this is that actual copy that I got that day. Because you guys know I've been purging my collection for the past year and a half, really cleaning everything out. And you can see this one's pretty rough, but I was like, this one never leaves. It's responsible for too much goodness. So that one stays in the collection no matter what. And the other one that I kind of picked out there, which I've used this to answer a bunch of questions in the past, thread questions, Billy Idol's Rebel Yell is definitely an album that means a lot to me, mainly because this was my introduction to all things new wave, hard rock, 80s pop, all of that. This is the album that started it all. The songs Eyes Without a Face, then this album, and then like the whole rock and pop and new wave world opened up to me from this. So definitely have to kind of put that one down as one that means a lot in that regard. Question number two, what's an album that no matter what, it will never leave your collection? I have a couple that I could say that about, but the main one I'm going to go with is this one here. This is my autographed copy of Godsmack's debut. Oh, sorry about the glare there. You can see there it's signed by Sully Erma. I met him back in 2012 and got him to sign that, and yeah, I mean, Godsmack's my favorite band, and I have an autographed copy of their debut. I mean, yeah, there's no way I would ever get rid of this. If I'm selling my collection, this is the last album to go. So that's my answer for that one. The next one here: what is your favorite genre, and what is your definitive album from that genre? Well, that's the one I kind of went overboard because I'm sure you guys know me. There's not a favorite genre. I'm all over the place. Um, so what I did was there was a few that I picked out where it's a genre I really like, and just kind of, I guess it was more of a main focus for me was just some definitive albums in some genres. That's more so kind of where I went with this question. So I picked out a few of my favorite genres. And actually, the first one is almost just the opposite, because this is an album that I think is so definitive to the genre, even though the genre itself kind of sucks to me. But this one is so great, I had to mention it in this question. So it is Miguel's Kaleidoscope Dream. Again, for those of you that really know me and have watched my videos over the years, the one thing that you know is 60s, 70s R&B, love it. 80s R&B, love it. 90s to late 90s R&B, love it. Late 90s going into the 2000s and 2010s, total crap. I'm sorry, I can't stand it. Very, very, very few and far between. And yeah, there's just a genre that just never holds a lot for me. But actually, two albums and two artists that came along that really, really just to some degree saved the genre for me. And one of those albums is this one here, which is Miguel's Kaleidoscope Dreams, came out in 2012. This is more R&B that has a teeny bit more of a pop flavor to it. But, oh my gosh, this album is just freaking fantastic. I mean, just song for song, up and down the line. It just brings back all those elements that I love so much about 80s R&B. He really brought it back with this. And I said, even though I don't like the genre, to me, this is a definitive piece of what R&B should be like that I think more artists need to look at and really try to follow. And which is not going to happen. I mean, Miguel, I don't think has even been able to follow up this album. It's just freaking awesome. And the other artist that I would put in that category too is Anthony Hamilton, another guy that kind of came back and really saved modern day R&B, at least gave me something to look forward to in modern day R&B. And this is a great example. This is the single for Coming From Where I'm From, which again is just a great song and just a great move back to, in my opinion, back to the way R&B is supposed to be. So those are two I had to pull out there. Now, one of my favorite genres, early, 80s hip hop, rap / hip hop, love it. Especially that time period where rap and hip hop were really kind of crossing over what was going on with the whole, break dancing thing and all of that, like where those worlds crossed. It's good stuff. And one of the definitive albums, I think, in that genre is Houdinis Escape. I mean, just album cannot get any better than this. Friends, We Are Houdini, The Freaks Come Out at Night, 5 Minutes of Funk. Whew. I mean, this album is perfection in that genre. So that's definitely a definitive one there. I won't go into too much detail on this, but I'm definitely a classical fan, but I'm not a very knowledgeable, wide base classical fan. But I've still really yet to hear anything that I've loved more than outside of Basil Polidorus' soundtrack to Conan the Barbarian. I think that's awesome, with Riddle of Steel and all those are great. But just as a piece by Carl Orff's Arena Burana is just one that I just think is freaking awesome. Never get tired of listening to that. So for me, that's a definitive piece in my classical world that I do love. And another one here, this kind of goes back to, grunge / hard alternative, that 90s, I use those two, grunge slash hard alternative, is a genre that I definitely love a lot. And I think one of the most definitive albums. You got your Pearl Jams, you got your Nirvanas, and a bunch of things you can pick from. But I'm going with Stone Temple Pilots' Core. I think this is just a core album that really sums up what I label more so as hard alternative, is what I label this as. But yeah, this album, not only does it have all the hits that are on it, but it's just a perfect album. It's, it can play in the grunge world, it can play in the hard rock world. Quite frankly, on some levels, it can play in the pop world. Kind of thinking about, radio play and things like that. And just one of the heaviest albums, not necessarily speed, like, not that type of heavy or even just volume, but there's something that's just thick to the punch with this album. And it's one of the things that makes me love it so much. This is a perfect album. So that really defines that grunge slash hard alternative genre that I like a lot. And the last two here, I thought about, good old fashioned Southern rock, that type of thing is definitely a genre that, if you call it a genre, but just an area of rock music that I really love. And I think one of the most definitive albums in that genre slash category, you could go to some Leonard Skinner stuff and, things like that, but I'm going to the Black Crowes on this album right here, the Southern Harmony of Musical Companion there. Awesome album. And one of the reasons why I would pick like the Black Crowes over something like a Skinner, with all the great albums that they had, is that with Leonard Skinner, you got more of, that was kind of classic rock with a great country Southern feel, kind of those two things meshed together. And it's like, that's Leonard Skinner, and to me, they did it better than anyone. You may have some, I'm just gonna leave it at that. And they did it better than anyone. But the reason why I would actually pick this album and really kind of the Black Crowes to represent that genre is because I think the Black Crowes, as well as any group, did a better job of representing the classic rock and all elements of the, I don't know, you can say the Southern experience, if you will, or the Southern culture, or the Southern flavor, however you want to put it. Because, Southern doesn't always necessarily mean country. To me, Southern mixes in the country elements that represents that. It's the blues elements that represent that. It's the gospel elements that represent that. Like, all of those are very, very strong elements that are represented by a lot of Southern music. And the Black Crowes put those things together better than I think any band I really ever heard. It's Southern rock, it's gospel, it's R&B, it's blues, and I mean, they freaking nail it. And this album, to me, is kind of the epitome of that genre slash category. Especially songs like Sting Me. I don't think it gets any better than that. I honestly don't. I don't think you can make a better in-your-face Southern rock song than Sting Me. And then you go to Remedy, then you go to Thorn in My Pride, and it's like, come on. Freaking album is nails. And last but not least, of course, metal is one of my favorite genres. Got to go with Black Crowes. Black Sabbath's Paranoid. Now again, you could look at it from a standpoint of, metal with, modern day stuff, between your thrash or grindcore or whatever else you kind of like. But again, when I'm thinking about, when I'm thinking about just like a definitive album, this is just kind of it, because this to me just goes back to, okay, we're gonna take away just a lot of the things that have been added to metal to make it more metal, whether it's the speed, whether it's the type of distortion, whether it's the the punch of the double bass, which I love so freaking much, and all that kind of stuff. Like, we're just gonna draw it all back to just the basic core foundation of what metal music is. And to me, this album is kind of where that line starts, so to speak. I know you can go back and look at other Sabbath albums and kind of say the same thing depending on like your feel, but this is the one that does it for me. So this to me is kind of the definitive bare bone essence of heavy metal, which is, to me, makes it a definitive album. So there's kind of my drawn out answer to that. Question number 4, album that has eluded you or that you want the most. The two that kind of came to mind right off the top of my head was Megadeth's Euthanasia. I've always wanted to have a copy of that, even though, excuse me, by far is not my favorite Megadeth album. I want one. It's just kind of one of those things. I just want one. And then Kiss Sonic Boom, same thing. That's the one album that I still need for my Kiss box set there, so I would like to get that to kind of complete that album's collection. And we know how hard it is to find those, so that would be the two that I would say I would really love to get my hands on. And then the kiddos had a couple questions. The first one being, what's your favorite thing about music? Oh gosh. There's a lot of different ways you can answer that question, outside of just kind of what it's meant for me emotionally and where it takes me and all that kind of stuff. Outside of that, I think the one thing that I love and respect the most about music is it kind of its level of acceptance. Kind of like I was talking about with Black Sabbath, how that's Paranoid is kind of back to just the core of what heavy metal is. I think music in general is kind of like that for the human race. I think music is just one of the things that takes us all back to just kind of the core of what we are, or kind of who we are. And then we come into this world and we start growing up and we start talking, interacting, and start getting opinions and blah blah blah, and then we start kind of corrupting it all. But we're just going back to the core of who we are, which is why I think why it's so easy for music to bring us all together in such ways. And I don't necessarily mean just bring us together in terms of agreeing or whatever, but I mean bring us together in terms of Iron Maiden is always a great example when I start thinking about this concept of talking about it, because Iron Maiden always does world tours, and pretty much as an Iron Maiden fan, you can go to any Iron Maiden concert pretty much on any continent, and you feel right in place. And it's just kind of like the fact that I could go somewhere where I know no one, maybe all my beliefs and the way I am or whatever else is completely different than everything in that culture. How can one song all of a sudden bring us together and put us on the same page? We're all screaming the same way. We're all throwing up the same devil horns. We're all, lip syncing the exact same words. We're all headbanging on the same beat. And all of a sudden, you can't tell who knows who or who doesn't know, because we're just like on one accord for 1 second because of that song, or not 1 second, but for that song, for that concert. And I think on a wider scale, that's just something that's really magical about music. Is it can get through all the crap and just just start connecting souls one to the other. And I just think, to me, that's just kind of a magical thing, because outside of maybe food and water, I'm not sure if there's a lot of other things that do that. So yeah, I can get into a whole long discussion about that, but I'll try to keep that on the surface and just kind of give that as the answer. So that's my favorite thing about music, is that power that it has. And then there was a question about the first Elvis Presley record published, first Elvis record published. I have to admit, I know absolutely zip about Elvis Presley. Outside of respecting him for what he brought to the world of rock, which to me, he was kind of one of the first true rock stars. I think he was one of the first to really bring the attitude where you had your Beatles that did what they did. You had, just a lot of different things. But it was just so very common, again, back in those days, to have, like the Beatles, 4 guys dressed in the same suits, and they sitting there and they're going back and forth. But Elvis was kind of one of the first, like rock stars, if you will. Even though I just don't like his stuff. I don't own a single Elvis Presley. Well, I'll take that back. Memphis Vinyl Gin sent me one as a gift as a VCLT, and I kept that because I always keep VCLT. But that's the only Elvis album that I own. I'm just not a huge Elvis fan. But you got to respect the hell out of what he did for rock and roll. But yes, I don't know jack about Elvis. I couldn't tell you anything about any of his pressings or anything like that. So sorry, definitely sorry about that. But yeah, so there you go, man. Sorry about the long ramble. We're at the 20-minute mark here. But yeah, again, congratulations on the 300 subs. We definitely look forward to your 500 subs contest, your 1,000 subs contest, and we'll just kind of keep this thing rolling. All right, take care. Let me know what you think, and we'll talk to you soon.